Hi everyone, this is Hot Topics and Trends in Clinical Research. I'm Adrienne DeRico. I work at UPMC Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There are no relationships to disclose related to this presentation. Compliance during COVID-19. Stay current. One of the best ways and easiest ways to stay current is by going to www.fda.gov/regulatory information and click subscribe to email updates. This is just a screenshot of our local IRB's homepage and some of the frequently asked questions and updates that they offer. Check with your local IRB often so you can stay current regarding the changes for your trials. The Clinical Research Toolbox on CFCRNet. The RC Toolbox has everything from source documents to startup trackers, Dell logs to notes to file, and certified letter templates. When you get some time, click there and look around. The Phone a Friend program is designed so that you can find someone in your time zone to discuss issues that you might be facing at your site regarding adapting to all of the changes that COVID has presented or any other research-related problem that you need to discuss with a more experienced research coordinator or a regulatory coordinator. Electronic regulatory binders. They remove the need for paper reg binders. They allow for capture of documents and correspondence directly from email and give you the ability to drag and drop files. This gives the staff and CRA access in remote situations and enables training and documentation through the system, and it utilizes electronic signatures and is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. Since the CRAs can have access to the reg binders remotely, this can support expedited startup, increased communication, enable remote monitoring, and provide a highly secure, cost-effective, long-term archiving. The importance of 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. The FDA says that electronic records, signatures, and handwritten signatures should be trustworthy, reliable, and generally equivalent to paper records and handwritten signatures executed on paper. So what this means is, 1, system validation. The system should be consistently reliable, affect product quality, safety, and record integrity. 2, audit trails. All system entries should be date and time stamped and ensure that changes to previous entries aren't obscured. Copies of records. All electronic records are subject to inspection, so make sure that the system is capable of complete, accurate copies that are easily accessible electronically as well as on paper. Record retention. Records need to be stored securely while preserving their content and meaning, so we store our end-of-study EDC info on encrypted flash drives. Security controls. Every user needs to have their own username and password. They need to expire and require revision and have different access levels for personnel. It needs version tracking, and final records need to be read-only files. Digital signatures. Digital signatures are allowed as long as they include the printed name of the signer, date and time, and intention of the signature. Training. Everyone with access to the system has to be trained and certified to use it. Regulatory binders. Okay, so these are 2 pictures from our regulatory binders. On the left-hand side, it's open, and on the right side, the tabs are collapsed, but you can see all the different things that we can keep in the binders, everything from CVs and licenses to lab documents and site credentials. This is an example of one of our subject binders. We've just started using these, and we can keep everything in these subject binders that we can in a paper binder, and We have everything from informed consents to our source documents and progress notes to ConMed's NAs. Electronic documentation of training. Our regulatory coordinator sends out, for example, it's like an email straight through the system for, say, a protocol amendment, and this would be to train everyone for that amendment. And you can see where a coordinator or one of the PIs or sub-Is may sign it, and then it's date and time stamped, and it says that they've reviewed the contents of the document. Electronic signature. The use of electronic signature helped us to stay compliant, and it's something that we will continue to use going forward. In the system that we use, we're able to ask the PI to sign, date, and even add text, like clinically significant or not clinically significant. Since electronic signature is so quick, it helps us to show great PI oversight. Phone consent. Check with your IRB to see if phone consent is approved. If not, you may need to submit a modification. This is our RC consent process. The RC mails a consent document and a stamped self-addressed return envelope to the subject. We set up a time and date for the call and review the consent with the subject. We have them sign and date and text or scan the document back to us. The RC signs and sends a copy back to the subject and documents the consent discussion in the medical record. The subject mails the original signature document back to the research coordinator. I should mention that it's important to send a sticky note on the consent telling the patient not to sign until they speak with the research coordinator or PI or sub-I, because the patients seem to want to send the document back right away. For the PI sub-I consent process, the RC sets up a date and time of the call and reviews the consent with the subject. The PI or sub-I calls to review, answer questions, and ask the subject to sign. The subject texts or scans the document back, and the PI or sub-I signs and sends a copy back to the subject, and then documents the consent discussion in the medical record. The subject mails the original signature document back to the research coordinator. This is our documentation of informed consent. This is our hospital's version of electronic documentation. We have options to click and go or drop downs for the time. One thing that became very important was being sure to fill in the comments section with the consent version, as we had a couple of studies where we had to reconsent over the phone, and it was helpful to know if a subject had been consented already and when. Protocol deviation documentation. Our regulatory coordinator, Jamie Adams, created this document for us to collect all protocol deviations related to COVID, which could be signed digitally by our PI. As you can see, it describes the protocol deviation, what we did about it, how the PI feels that the deviation may affect the subject, and was it reported to the sponsor or IRB. Also of note, this was sent out on Yammer in March, but if you need it, just email me and I'll send it to you directly. If you have any questions, please contact me at adrian.dorico2@upmc.edu. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to NACFC 2020. I'm Candy Schmall. I'm a research coordinator manager at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. I've been a research coordinator for about 21 years, been at Children's Mercy for 25 of the 32 years I've been a nurse. And with me today is my coworker, Danny.
Hi everyone, I'm Danny Wolf and I am a research coordinator at Children's Mercy Hospital as well. And I've been a nurse for, it's a second profession for me, so probably going on about 10 years now. 5 of that has been in research.
So today we're going to talk to you about everyday mindfulness and coping with stress, which we probably all have a whole lot more of in this day and age of COVID. So to begin, neither of us have any disclosures to share. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Danny to get us started.
So when Candy first brought this topic and this idea from the TDN, mindfulness, I jumped on it because this is something that I struggle with. I am not very good at being mindful. We have lots of programs here at Children's Mercy to work or to benefit the whole person, the whole employee here. And lots of programs geared at reducing stress and anxiety and being more mindful. However, I'm not very good at it, so I thought I'm going to try and work on this and see if I can be better at it. So let's first look at what mindfulness is. It is the basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. So basically, it's the ability to be fully present in a moment in time. And there's many benefits to being mindful. Some of them are reduced stress, better performance. It helps us gain insight and awareness to ourselves, as well as being a little more insightful and aware of others and their feelings. So I think it makes us a better person overall. However, like I said, it's not that easy. Mindfulness, the challenge of mindfulness is it's easier said than done, especially with me. And so Candy and I got to talking about this, and we were talking about how we know it's good for us, but what are the difficulties? And we kind of determined that maybe it's related to personality types. So we looked at personalities. I did an internet search, and there's so many personality types. One of them, I think the most I saw was 26. There's 24, I think there's 22. I think Myers-Briggs has 16, and it's all these personality types overlapping. However, for the simplicity of this topic and this presentation, we decided to just talk about the two basic types that we're all familiar with, the type A and the type B. And the type A, as we all know, is the goal achiever, competitor. They like to be recognized. They're rushed to finishing projects, and they typically finish them ahead of the deadline. They like to finish prior to the deadline, so they're project focused. And the type B personality is more laid back. They have less drive, less ambition. It's not a lesser of a person. They just don't have that same competitive edge in their psyche that that comes out. It's their personality. It was interesting. These personalities types were identified by two cardiologists, Drs. Friedman and Rosenman, back in the 50s. And it came about because they needed the chairs in their waiting room reupholstered. And the reupholster guy came in and said, "This is awfully weird. There's where it's uneven. It's just like on the arms and the edges of the chairs." And he said it's not typically uniform, which is what he's used to seeing, and it wore out faster than what they should have. So they just went ahead and had them reupholstered, and they got to thinking about it. And then years later, they came up with these personality types, and they determined that their cardiology patients were stressed waiting for their appointments. And that's how they came up with these personalities. Now, this is kind of a funny video of, you guessed, type A or type B. It's going to be type A. You'll see how prevalent it is, but it's just a funny take on a type A personality. Maybe we all can relate to this.
The question now is, how do people respond to their scandals?
For the wider region, I think one of your children's just walked in, but I mean, shifting sands in the region, do you think relations with the North may change?
clear at the moment what effect former President Gun-Hae's impeachment will have on the territories. Unfortunately, discontent in South Korea is not only related to President Gun-Hae's administration.
Okay.
This is a major embarrassment for South Korea, who often criticizes the North of corruption,
Right.
and who now find themselves in the middle of a massive corruption case themselves.
Sorry, you do look rather busy there. We can reschedule
President
this.
Gun-Hae is
No.
very likely to face jail time too.
Okay.
I would argue, in an attempt to make an example of her.
Right, so what does this all mean for the future of South Korea?
So the future of South Korea really hangs in the balance.
Oh my God, is that a bomb?
And it'll be
Goodness
interesting
me.
to see how the North reacts to this new shift in power.
Indeed. Well, this certainly has been... sorry,
I've looked everywhere. I've looked in the sock drawer.
Your husband is...
I anticipate there'll be more to come from this region in the next few months.
Kate Wordsworth, you're obviously busy. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, let's find this sock then.
Okay, hopefully you found that a little funny. We enjoyed it and we can relate. So maybe there's some of you out there that can relate as well. Here's some negative work attributes for the types of personality. The type A, if you can imagine, they are rushed to get things done, so they're impatient. They can get bored easily. They like a lot of stimulus. They're easily angered and they may have a short fuse. On the type B side, they're not very detail oriented. They have a short attention span. They lack that competitive drive. They're more on relationships, so they will strive to work on the relationships, and they may be visiting and socializing with coworkers in their department or other departments. That's kind of what you'll see. These things, the behaviors, they have physical impacts and health impacts as well. So for type A, you may see facial tensing, teeth grinding, dark circles under their eyes because they're not getting good sleep at night. They may have some facial sweating. And if you can imagine, as you can imagine, these will exhibit in some health concerns such as cardiovascular disease, hypertension. Not only are they stressful by nature, but because of that stressful nature, they tend to go for jobs that are very stressful. So they will have job-related stress in addition to the stress that's already put upon themselves just by the very nature of their personality. And because of that and their project focus, they're going to maybe socially isolate. They're not going to have those relationships like the type B personality. The type B, on the other hand, is very relaxed, laid back. And because of this nature, they tend to have higher immunity levels. But that doesn't mean they don't have health concerns. Because they're so laid back, they may overlook aches and pains. They may overlook their regular checkups. This would be the person, if you say, you know, how long has it been since you've been to the dentist? They may go, well, let me think about that. It's been quite a while, maybe years. So they're not the routine follow-up, regular checkups, annual exams type people. Now, so we have these different personalities. They're clearly different. But we all want to have reduced stress and we all want to reduce anxiety. We all want to be better healthy. So how do we do this? What do we do that's unique to us, or what works best for us? So this was another kind of funny video that we found. I hope you enjoy it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what you can do after this is over. We do have some technical difficulties. Hopefully this will come through okay.
Until you realize where. So what I'm going to do today, I want to start today with a breathing exercise. Everybody up for that? Everybody take a deep breath in. Big breath, good. And then breathe out through your mouth. Someone had garlic, but that's okay. Wonderful. Doesn't that feel good? Doesn't that feel good? We forget to breathe sometimes, and I think today is very important. I want to remind everybody, it's National Stress Awareness Month. In case you're not aware enough of your stress, all month long, you're supposed to take all the stress you have, your job stress, your money stress, your life stress, and then you just eat. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. You drink is what you do. No, I'm kidding. No. I'm kidding again. You smoke is what you do. No, no, no. You gamble is what you do. I could go on and on. No, there are better ways to deal with your stress. I've talked about them before. You can meditate, you can exercise, you can come here. I'm a delight, you know. I just read a survey that said more than half of all Americans deal with stress by shopping. How many people do that? How many people say, yeah. The survey was right. That was about half of you. And you know, I think it's a good idea because you get to wander around a big mall and you let yourself get distracted by everything that's in there. And it's a good feeling to buy new things because when you look good, you feel good. And then you walk out of the mall and you're feeling all accomplished and triumphant until you realize where you parked your car. You have completely forgot where you parked your car, so you have to wander around until you find your car, and then you finally get to your car and your kid is screaming, your feet hurt by that time, and then you finally find your car, but now you can't find your keys. So you're thinking maybe you threw them in the shopping bag. So then you bend down to dig through the shopping bag. That's when you get stabbed in your upper thigh region because your keys aren't in the shopping bag, they're in your pocket. So then you go to pick up the bag, which is now soaking wet at the bottom because you put it in a puddle. It's not even raining. You know what that is? It's soda because someone put a cup down next to your car, and when you bent down, you kicked it with your foot, and now there's soda all over. The new blouse that you just bought is in that bag, which has a stain all over it, and you want to go back and return it, but you don't have the receipt because guess where that is? You ate it. That's how hungry you were when you were shopping. To relieve your stress, you thought it was a piece of taffy that you found in your purse. You thought that would tie you over till dinner, but you're so high from all the perfume people that are spraying you as you're going through, so you just ate the receipt whole. You just swallowed it. So now you have a stomach ache, and you have a bruised thigh and a dirty shirt, and you get home, you have to make dinner because it's taco night and ain't nobody else going to do it. So I can see why people shop to relieve stress, but if you ask me, I have a different method to deal with stress, and it is called dancing.
So actually dancing that Ellen mentions is really a good activity for type A personality, as well as music, exercise. And the exercise is really good because you can set goals. That type of person can set goals and then they achieve them. So they're goal setters. The expressive writing, hobbies, staying connected or meetups. This is important for the type A personality. However, they will tend to not do this. So they're going to have to work at staying connected and meeting up with people. They're, scheduling those coffee dates with friends or family because they tend to focus on their work. But this is something that they're going to have to work on because it's actually a good thing for them to do. And then even yoga, which I was surprised about. I consider myself kind of a crossover between type A and type B, and I'm not a yoga person because you have to sit there for several minutes in certain poses. However, try goat yoga. That might keep the type A's interest if they get bored with regular yoga. And then type B, of course, with their laid-back nature, they can do the meditation, the breathing exercises, which is great. That'll help with the whole mindfulness. And they can also do any of the activities associated with type A. However, I found it interesting, like with exercise. But the reason that they can do exercise is because they will do more of the group classes, and they do it because of the socialization aspect. So they're there with the other people in the class having fun, not necessarily achieving any goals. So that's all of my part. I'm going to hand it over to Candy now to talk a little further.
So how do we move forward in the face of all this uncertainty that we face? I think the first thing to do is just to remember that feeling anxious is a normal part of being human. It's important to remember that we are not our thoughts. They're not facts. All right. When we accept this, our thoughts lose that power over us. They can't control us as they would if we would, believe that our thoughts are what we are. So just remember, you're not your thoughts. You want to focus on what is in your control and work on that. So it's important to find, in whatever situation you're dealing with, find something that you can control and make that your focal point. Just work on that. Set a plan to deal with that. Practicing self-care. As health professionals, I think we all know that this is very important, and we need to make the time to do it each and every day if possible. It's easy to push that aside, but I think, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, when I skip a workout or I miss a few days, I can tell it. I feel worse for it. So just make sure and take that time and practice your self-care, whatever that might be. You also want to practice positive self-talk. Talking negatively to yourself, just beating yourself up over things. You know, I heard somebody say in another talk I attended that it motivates them. And I think, you know, even she admitted that it was a temporary motivation. It made her get the job done, but then, you know, she didn't feel any better because of the negative self-talk. So just try to be nice to yourself. Treat yourself like you would your friend. I think that's a key. You want to also allow yourself to take breaks from what's bothering you. Just take a moment, walk away, go do something else for a little bit, and just give it a break. Another way you can do that is to write down what's troubling you and look at ways that you can improve that. And in our researching for this talk today, I came across this Overcome Overwhelm worksheet. It was actually in a Vital Smarts webinar that I attended, which is a very good program of webinars that are offered out there, so you can look for those. But this particular worksheet, what it suggests you do is you just write down every single thing that's bothering you, that's occupying your brain space with stress. So, you know, jot down, you know, you're worried about what you're going to cook for dinner, how you're going to pay your bills, that deadline you've got to meet at work, that new study that's ready to open and you're not ready. Whatever it would be, just jot everything down on this list and then look at it and decide, do I need to do this right now? Can I decline it? Can I renegotiate it? Renegotiate meaning, can I, you know, reassign this to someone else? Does it have to be me? Can I put it off until later? Just kind of figure out how you can deal with each and everything. And, you know, as Danny mentioned, this is a great exercise for that type A personality, which we both tend to be, because it's kind of a checklist. It's a way to deal with things. On paper, you can actually go through and mark things off as you're able to do them, or decide that you just have to prioritize and not do that at this time. So if you have an opportunity, I do recommend trying this worksheet. And if anybody wants the worksheet in one piece, we couldn't make it fit on our slide in one piece, but we'd be happy to share that with you. You can just reach out to us and we'll give our contact information at the end. So another thing to remember is that we will get through this. I know, you know, we've heard that a million times, but a good reminder of that is that there's always another side to every storm. And I had a specific reminder of this after the hurricane hit Louisiana. I was listening to the radio the next morning, and a caller called in and was talking about, you know, the storm. And then they said, you know, I woke up this morning to sunshine. My house is here. My family's safe. It's a good day. So just keep in mind that after every storm, there is a bright side, another day. You want to also spend time finding your footing. Look to the experts. You know, as health professionals, I think we have lots of access to lots of good resources. I know Children's Mercy specifically just offers us a ton of things, whether it's people that we can talk to, webinars that we can attend, wellness programs that we can take part in. We have an on-site fitness center. There's just lots of things that are offered out there. Find what you can find in your setting that is being offered for you, because I'm sure it's out there. I think everybody's trying to help people find their calm. With that, you want to just take time to calm and center yourself. Just sit back, take a deep breath. Just, you know, just relax for a minute. Center yourself that way. Another thing that's very helpful is a positive social exposure. So whether that be, you know, calling a friend on FaceTime, actually seeing one another, taking a walk with your spouse, having a happy hour with your coworkers, a virtual happy hour. Just find something, because even a virtual social exposure, a positive social exposure, can relax the vagal nerve and help to calm and soothe you. Something else I learned about during the research for this presentation was something called learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is that sense of powerlessness that can arise from a traumatic event, or that can come from persistent failure to succeed. So you just need to stop and remember that failure is only failure if you give up and quit trying. So just keep going. Find a way to make a choice that will change the outcome and be the best choice for you. As we get ready to close the presentation, I just want to share a couple more food for thought ideas. And the first one is that happiness is less about getting the things that we don't have and more about appreciating all that we do have. So take time to stop and reflect on all the good. And, you know, some days it may take more effort than others, but just reflect on everything good, whether it's the sun is shining or you're healthy, you don't have COVID. Just focus on those things, and that act in itself can help lower stress and anxiety. Another thing you can do is, I came across this website called viacharacter.org, which we have in our references, and we'll get to that. But on that website, they have a free character strength test that you can take. And so you go through and you answer all these questions, and it identifies your character strengths. And I think there are 24 of them in total. And it aligns them in the order that are your strengths to your not so strongs. They don't call them weaknesses because they're a strength. They're just not quite as strong as your most strong. So I do encourage you to go out and take a look at that. Some of the choices that I had surprised me. Some of the strengths that I identified in myself surprised me, and some of the weaknesses did too. But you know, a lot of it fell kind of in line with how I deal with things. So I do encourage you to take a look at that and see if that would be a way that can help you use your strengths to get through your particular situation, and also help you to become happier and develop more positive relationships with those that matter to you most. So we do have all of our resources listed here where we got everything from. And I did also list the VIA character website here. And I also want to mention the 10% Happier app. It is an app that you can download on your phone, and it's free to healthcare professionals. I think it's teachers and a whole bunch of people during COVID. They made it free for downloading. And each day they offer a daily mindfulness session, or they also have topics that come across. Like I know I got a notice recently for one, a mindfulness session for you to use during the election time. So lots of different choices out there. I know there's some on dieting, healthy eating. There's lots of them out there. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that app, I do highly recommend it. They're usually short. You can do them very quickly. They have some for morning, some for night. It is a very helpful app to have. So with that, again, as I mentioned earlier, here are our contact information, our email addresses, and we would love to answer any questions, provide that worksheet if you'd like that, or any of the other resources that we came across or that we have available to us here. We're happy to share. Just reach out. And with that, thank you so much for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time you're listening to this. My name is Brendan Klein. I'm a research manager at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon. And me and my colleague, Jenna Bucher, are going to talk to you a little bit today about how you can use Microsoft OneNote as a research management tool at your site. And neither I nor Jenna have any disclosures. So just a little background on our site in Portland. We are a fairly large center with around 425 total patients. Our patient population is pretty evenly split between peds and adults. And we have a combined clinical research program. So we have one research team for both the pediatric and adult CF centers. Even though they are located in different hospitals, technically the hospitals are connected by a skywalk, and so we're really close together with one research team. We have 4 full-time CF research coordinators, and that includes me, who also serves as the manager of our group. And then we have 4 pulmonologists who serve as investigators, so 3 peds pulmonologists and 1 adult, who are the PIs on all of our studies. So I'd like to show some images of our beautiful site out in Portland, and it looks like this image got a little bit blurry stretched on the screen here, but this is our campus, which you can see is rather large. There's actually 4 different hospitals located all close together here, and this is up on the hill about a mile above the city of Portland downtown. So there's a OHSU Main Hospital, which is an adult hospital, Dornbecker Children's Hospital, which is affiliated with OHSU, And then there are also separate veterans and Shriners hospitals as well. And so you can see it's a large campus. We also have a medical school, a dental school, nursing school, lots of bench research happening up on the hill here. And then in the past 10 or 20 years, they've also developed what we call the South Waterfront campus, which is down below the main hospital along the Willamette River, where there's several buildings down there as well. And you can see our very famous aerial tram that actually runs shuttles people back and forth from the South Waterfront campus up to the main campus on the hill. And that's just one way to help kind of reduce the car traffic that's driving up and down the roads. And then you can see downtown Portland there in the background, and that is Mount St. Helens there, which erupted. It's a volcano that erupted, I think about 40 years ago, exactly this year. Unfortunately, at the time that I am recording this presentation, September 16th, this is currently what Portland looks like. We have been experiencing some of the worst wildfires in our state's history, which have led to some smoke inundation over the past week or so. And so hopefully by the time you're listening to this, Portland is back to looking like its beautiful self, and we can go outside and enjoy the fresh air again. So just want to touch briefly on our QI methodology that we used to help us kind of develop this project. Like most clinical research sites in CF, we use the EQUIP-CR methodology. Lots of tools available on CFCRNet in terms of goal setting and PDSA worksheets. We use, for this project, use a lot of brainstorming and multi-voting as a team, and trying to come up with both the idea for this project and strategies for attacking it. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what our QI meetings look like, this is just a really simple brainstorm that we did at one of our meetings a while back. And we were really just brainstorming about what should our area of focus be for our next QI project. And so the way it works is everybody's allowed to just throw ideas out there. There's no critiques of anybody's ideas. They're all given equal treatment. They go up on the board, and then each team member is able to maybe rank their top 1 or 2 or 3, depending on how many we have. And the 2 or 3 topics that get the most, the highest rank, or the lowest rankings, I guess, but the most priority are the where we move forward with. And then you can even do a second level of multi-voting to try to get down to what area you're going to focus on. And so we use this both when we were deciding on what was the area that we should address, and also how to address it. So when we were developing our OneNote, as I'll talk about later, we actually voted on, hey, which information needs to go in this OneNote and which information doesn't need to go on this OneNote, in the OneNote. And we took we did brainstorming around that idea and then voted to kind of narrow the information down. So it's a really simple method. It's a really simple thing to do in your meetings, but it's also very effective, and it really helps to keep things moving forward. You don't get stuck in your kind of analysis phase. So the objectives for this particular project that we took on that led to the development of our OneNote were to improve the consistency in which clinical trial information is compiled and stored at our site, and to improve the knowledge of and access to information for the PIs at our site. And so we really saw this as a weak point, to where both RCs, but especially PIs, were having trouble finding some really key information that they might need. And usually if it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill thing, like, that's not the end of the world, but they can go to an RC or something like that. But we really recognize that in certain situations, the PIs might need to access this information urgently in an emergency situation. So this became kind of part of our emergency plan. And in addition, as we all know, there's turnover in RCs and PIs occasionally. And so having kind of a consistent and reliable source of all this study information really became an area of focus for us in order to just improve the processes of our research team. So how do we end up deciding to develop Microsoft OneNote for these purposes? 2 of our RCs, Jenna, who's going to speak in a little bit, and Annie Hansen, Both previously worked with the cancer research team at OHSU, and OneNote was used widely with those groups for a variety of purposes. And so they knew a lot about the software. I honestly did not, and I'm always a little hesitant to try to dive into something that you're just completely unfamiliar with because of how busy we are, of course. But once I did start messing around with this software and this program, I was really blown away. I wish I had taken it on sooner. And so, just some of the strengths of the Microsoft OneNote, as you can see, I have listed here. So real-time collaboration, it's a living document. It can be worked on by anybody at any time, multiple people at the same time. It doesn't have any kind of those lagging issues. But despite being something that everybody can work on simultaneously, it actually doesn't live, it's not a cloud-based software. And so that eliminates a lot of issues with security, which I'm going to talk about as well. OneNote's highly customizable, so it is literally kind of like a blank slate that you can build into anything you want it to be. And you'll see more what I mean by that when I show you a picture of ours. But it can really be used in such a variety of ways. And because what works for one site might not work for the other, the flexibility there is really nice. I mentioned this already, but it securely stores information. So it is secure, and it also is not cloud-based, so that helps with firewall and other security issues at sites. It is a document that lives on our X drive, which is our secure drive at OHSU. Anybody can access the X drive, our particular X drive, which of course is limited, but anybody that can access that on our team can access the OneNote from anywhere that they can access the X drive. And so that's really nice, but also secure. It can be used on any device and operating system. So, I mean, Microsoft programs and software are pretty ubiquitous. It even can be used on Macs, not a problem, and can be used remotely on your phone if you need it to be. And it obviously integrates well with other Microsoft programs. So it is part of the Microsoft suite, just like Excel and Word and PowerPoint. Most sites will have it for that reason. It gets kind of built in with those. So you might have to have your IT folks add it to your computer, but in terms of getting it at most sites, it will be available because if they have a contract with Microsoft for other things, OneNote is going to be included. And it also integrates very well with Teams, which we are just kind of starting to use at our site, but has become obviously super important and a helpful software now that we are working from home due to COVID. We actually started this project and did most of it pre-COVID, believe it or not. So we didn't really have this idea of like making a tool something that worked well when we were all at home most of the time. But we were just really fortunate that OneNote is perfect for that situation, and it actually has been a huge added benefit. So just real briefly, before I turn it over to Jen, I just wanted to show you an example of one of our OneNote pages. And in OneNote, they're basically called notebooks. And within each of your notebooks, you can have as many tabs as you want, which you see across the top there in the different colors. We have decided to have a different tab for each study. And then within each tab, you can have a drop-down list, which you see along the right side of the page there, where you can divide it into as many categories as you want. And again, as I mentioned, this is completely customizable. It can be anything you want it to be. We developed how our OneNote pages were going to look as a team, so it's a very collaborative process. Again, trying to determine what information to include and what not to include, because again, we wanted this to be really a source of quickly accessible, vital information. We didn't want it to be bogged down with too much information. We also want to make sure that if you're getting things from here, they're accurate. So we did not, as you may see there, we don't have links or uploaded documents like protocols or ICFs, because our entire team knows those have to come from IRB to make sure that you have the most recent versions. And you can upload documents into this, so where there, it has a document attached. You can even upload audio and video files to this OneNote. But again, as you can see here, the information we're trying to provide is that vital information. So, what is the study protocol? What is the IRB number? What is our site number? Who are the coordinators? Who's the study monitor? How do you get a hold of them? Who's the medical monitor? How do you get a hold of them? How do you report an SAE? How do you get to IWRS and EDC and those things in case you need to unblind a patient. How do you order drug? Those are the key kind of things that we wanted to make sure were recorded consistently across all of our studies and available to everyone on the team. So that when we have turnover or when there's an emergent situation, we don't have to worry about that people aren't able to find this. So again, it is hard to really show you all the things that OneNote can do, but this is just kind of a little taste of what ours looks like. Again, everybody can work on this in real time, so it's no problem to have 5, 6, 7, 8 people have this document open, each of us in our own tabs, making edits, making changes, and it's completely smooth, and it's pretty incredible that that is the case. But so just can't say enough about how great this software is. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jenna, and she's going to go more into how we measured kind of the efficacy of our efforts in using this OneNote by surveying our PIs on that matter. So thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to Jenna.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenna, and as Brendan said, I'm one of the 4 research coordinators at OHSU working on cystic fibrosis clinical trials. So I'm just going to pick this talk up at the methods and results section of our OneNote QI project. So in order to assess the efficacy and efficiency of the OneNote notebooks that we had created, we decided to administer a quiz to our PIs that was 16 questions long. And we administered this test to them pre the introduction of OneNote and post the introduction of OneNote. Most of the information included in the quiz was available in our OneNote notebooks, but we also wanted to test the knowledge of our PIs based on information that couldn't necessarily be found in OneNote or couldn't necessarily be stored in OneNote. So for example, like Brendan said, we, as a rule of thumb, try not to include or attach IBs or protocols to the OneNote, just because if one of those documents gets out of date and someone forgets to update the version attached to OneNote, that can create some problems. So we just try not to do that. So in our quiz, you'll see later, but we had the PIs, for example, locate where we stored an IB. So our intervention consisted of an hour-long training in which we taught the PIs the functionality of OneNote. We showed them the notebooks we had created and described to them how we intended the notebooks to be used. And then pre and post test, we measured the percentage of correct answers and the time it took for all of our PIs to complete the tests. So here's an example and just a snippet of the tests that we had administered to our PIs. So you can see here some of the information that we wanted to test our PIs on was to identify a subject based on their subject number. This is really important considering how many documents PIs are asked to sign that are named with just a subject number. We also asked the PIs to identify contact information for our monitors and medical monitors. And then not seen here on this page, but like some other questions that we asked were related to like departmental contact information. So we asked them, what is the phone number for our research pharmacy? Probably not needed, but who knows? That's information that we would like our PIs to have readily available. So as you can see here, this is a bar graph with the test scores of our PIs, both pre and post intervention. The pre-intervention test scores are indicated by the columns in yellow, and the post-intervention test scores are indicated by the columns in blue. And as you can see, the pre-test scores varied quite a bit between our investigators, but on average, our investigators scored 58% pre-intervention and 93% post-intervention. So that was really great to see. And then here is a bar graph detailing the time it took each of our investigators to complete the test, both pre-intervention and post-intervention. Pre-intervention is indicated by the columns in green, and post-intervention is indicated by the columns in orange. So unfortunately, we had to omit the times for our investigator number 3, just because of some technical difficulties we had during the post-test and then some other issues that we had during the pre-test. But on average, it took our PIs 44 minutes to complete the test pre-intervention, so pre the introduction of OneNote, and 21 minutes to complete the test post-intervention. So that's great. It cut the time more than in half. Some conclusions based on the results of this test and this project were that Microsoft OneNote effectively increased PI knowledge. It also improved the ability to access needed information in an efficient and timely manner. And it improved the consistency in which clinical trial data is organized at our site. Some opportunities were that this project enabled us to engage with PIs during this process and allowed us to examine what clinical trial information is essential to their work and to identify existing gaps in knowledge among our PIs. We also discovered how OneNote can be used to support other areas of our research by creating onboarding and training modules and study checklists, just as a couple examples. And then also this was an unexpected benefit, but after working from home due to the pandemic, we found that OneNote allowed us to easily collaborate and work remotely with one another. Some challenges that we had. So firstly, we had some technical difficulties with our PIs. Sometimes they had trouble accessing or downloading OneNote. OneNote, like Brendan said, does come as part of your Microsoft platform, Microsoft Office platform, I should say. But we had to download OneNote specifically from our IT's website, which you may also need to do. We also had some difficulties in administering the tests under controlled conditions. So we tried to schedule times with our PIs to have them do the test within the same room as us so that we could kind of keep an eye on them. We wanted them to stick to using the computer only, so we really didn't want them siphoning through any binders or anything like that. But as you can imagine, having a PI sit down for an extended period of time while they're busy working is a lot. And so our investigator 3, for example, had to leave and take care of some other issues during the middle of the test, which is why we didn't collect his time. And then post-intervention, we obviously weren't planning on this, but the pandemic had started right around the time that we were able to start testing our PIs after we had introduced them to OneNote. And so we just relied on them to tell us the times that it took them to take the test. And then also another challenge will be to keep OneNote updated and accurate. So in order for OneNote to work effectively, information really does need to be accurate, obviously. So if you have an updated contact information for your monitor, then it's important to update that in OneNote. Otherwise, the purpose of OneNote is basically futile. Some future directions. So we hope to continue to develop our OneNote notebook by adding more onboarding tools, more training manuals, and how-to guides, etc. At some point, we'd also like to assess the frequency of use of OneNote for both our PIs and our Cs, and to look for areas of continued improvement based on any feedback that we may receive. And this is sort of a new opportunity, but there is the ability to integrate OneNote within Microsoft Teams so that Microsoft Teams can be the central location for a lot of documents and OneNote can be used within Microsoft Teams. I don't know exactly what this looks like yet because Microsoft Teams is new to our institution, but I'm looking forward to exploring the functionality of OneNote embedded within Microsoft Teams. So thank you for listening. We really appreciate it, and we're really excited about this project and all the opportunities that OneNote presents. Feel free to contact either Brendan or me if you have any questions. Our emails are listed here. We'd be happy to share the templates that we have or give you some inspiration. And I personally would be happy just to show you how to use OneNote. I really like OneNote, and I hope you are able to utilize it at your site and find that it helps you. Thank you so much. Bye.
This presentation is Lessons Learned from the COVID-19 Pandemic from the CRA perspective, with Jeanette Dingledine and myself, Matt Myers. We are CRAs at the Therapeutic Development Network Coordinating Center at Seattle Children's in Seattle, Washington. I do not have any relationships to disclose related to this presentation.
I do not have any relationships to disclose related to this presentation either.
So our agenda for this presentation is broken up into 3 sections. So identifying COVID-19 restrictions, the who, where, when, what, and how. Modified processes here at the Coordinating Center due to barriers caused by COVID-19. We'll give some examples from our managed studies here at the TDN. Then the impact on future study design, so applying our learned knowledge and then planning accordingly for future studies. Identifying COVID restrictions. As you are all aware, COVID restrictions across the United States are constantly changing and very dependent on location, making it difficult to coordinate the needs of 92 different sites in 42 different states. Restrictions can vary from state to state and even from institution to institution, even if they're located in the same city. So looking at this map, you can see where these centers are located across the country. By superimposing the all too familiar COVID hotspots, you begin to just visualize how much this impacts the entire CF network. So what helped us identify barriers and restrictions caused by the COVID pandemic? You all are aware of these network-wide impact assessment surveys, so I'm sure many of you have filled these out, so thank you. It's really helped us identify restrictions on a network level as to what sites are capable or not capable of doing. Clinical study managers have also been communicating with sites on a study-wide level to identify any study-specific barriers for currently open or upcoming studies. Usually there's questions that revolve around the ability to see patients, perform necessary study procedures, or in case of startup, the ability to perform activities such as document collection and modification. Site-specific communication, which in my opinion is the most significant, is usually because a site discovers a particular barrier at their site. Usually it's a one-off situation, and sometimes that one-off is really the leading edge for anticipating the same issues with other sites. Over time, patterns evolve. At the beginning of the pandemic, we noticed just how much one study was being impacted by COVID-19. This is at first, but then we realized the decisions that we were making had implications for multiple studies, staff, and CF centers, so we developed a coordinated and innovative approach to address these issues. A COVID-19 daily triage call was set up with upper management and the clinical study managers to discuss issues or questions due to impacts on studies from COVID-19. This coordinated approach allowed us to document these known issues, have discussions, and also make decisions in real time. So based off that, we identified several COVID-19 restrictions. So research staff was and still are working in different capacities, whether that's working remotely or being assigned to different work. Some centers are only providing services for clinical care and not research. Some IRBs are even limiting their reviews to COVID trials only. Some sites are not allowing for aerosol generating procedures to be performed at all, and some only with increased precautions. Some sites require a negative COVID test. There are medication shortages, specifically short-acting bronchodilators that are in high demand due to the pandemic. Also with these wildfires, I'm guessing it will only increase. The subject's ability to travel were also affected, as many states had restrictions on travel, and many patients frequently visit CF centers in a different state other than their own. And all of this leads into subject staff safety. Next, Jeanette is going to introduce some of the processes that were modified at the TDN due to the pandemic.
How study visits changed. When sites started closing due to COVID, a lot of questions started surfacing. How will we be able to complete study visits? Our institution is closed. Can we miss visits, or can they be delayed? Can we do telehealth visits or home collection? Were just a few of the questions that were being asked when everything closed. The TDN talked with PIs and statisticians to come up with the best plan. Some studies, like PROMISE, were able to miss some follow-up visits, but had to delay their primary endpoint visits. We also started talking about hybrid visits. Can sites do a mostly in-person visit with a home spirometry visit, or a telehealth visit with a home spirometry and parking lot draw? Rethinking study procedures. When most of our sites shut down, the TDN had to start thinking outside the box on how sites could actually perform study procedures and collections. One of the procedures we started talking about was spirometry, which is a primary endpoint for many studies. We also talked about specimen collections. Would subjects be willing to do home collections, like sputum or OP? Or would they be willing to come in to get blood drawn from their cars in a parking lot? We would like to thank some of our sites for letting us know about parking lot draws. Without you, we would not have known about this possibility. We would also like to give a big thank you to the CF Foundation, because they quickly pivoted and thought of a solution for spirometry and started providing Zephyr-X home spirometers to sites so that they could give them to their patients. They also agreed to provide spirometers to all PROMISE subjects. Thank you for helping to save the PROMISE study.
Meaningful data collection. What are we doing with incomplete data? I will use the NTM Predict and Patient study as an example. Many subjects completed their clinic visits via telehealth, and because of the nature of telehealth visits, research coordinators weren't always able to attend the clinic visits to complete the necessary procedures. So sometimes this information has to be collected post hoc from clinic notes. So what do we do if the data collected at a visit is incomplete? Well, we want to collect any meaningful data, so as it relates to an endpoint or identified by our statisticians, even if it's incomplete. So an example would be home spirometry. Most home spirometers only collect the FEV1 data. Even though the rest of the spirometry data is not available, we still want to collect that FEV1 data as it is related to an endpoint. This also leads into CFQR completion. RCs aren't always able to attend the telehealth visits, so sometimes questionnaires had to be securely emailed or even snail mailed to the subjects. If this was not possible or subjects had trouble sending them back, sites have been very creative in obtaining these completed questionnaires, including using cell phone photos and scans. Since study visit dates or windows are not defined in this particular protocol, we also allowed for sites to collect CFQRs within a reasonable time frame if subjects were unable to come to clinic or have a telehealth visit. Thankfully, many of the new TDNCC studies have electronic questionnaires, and some of the current studies may be transitioning to questionnaires that are electronic in the future. Study closeout changes. How do we close out a study during a pandemic? I'm going to use the TEACH study as an example. So Seattle Children's restricted all travel starting on March 6th, and all remaining in-person closeout visits were canceled. We had to figure out how to perform closeout remotely. We were also under a strict timeline. Final closeout visits had to be completed by March 31st. That basically gave us 3 weeks. So what did we do? Well, a central document review was performed by reconciling what we had on site here at the TDNCC, and then confirmation from the sites that these were filed. IP reconciliation was performed by working with RCs and pharmacists to review drug accountability and destruction logs remotely. Sites who use Vestigo, I'm giving you a shout out for this, thank you. So sites who used an electronic log or similar platform to Vestigo made this much easier. PI closeout calls were also conducted remotely to go over the investigator responsibilities and update a timeline on this PI sign-off of casebooks. Knowing the barriers to completing all closeout tasks, query resolution was also initiated early to allow more time for sites who had limited availability or access to EDC. Investigators were also invited to sign off on casebooks earlier than planned to allow extra time. All those changes said, query resolution and PI sign-off occurred on time and ahead of schedule on May 22nd. All closeout visits, query resolution, and PI sign-off occurred within 3 months during a pandemic. That is very impressive. So another big shout out to all the sites that made that possible, which in turn allows us to share the study results at this year's NACFC. So stay tuned for that. This also brings into question how much monitoring can be completed remotely, and what does this mean for future in-person monitoring visits? Rethinking startup. Some startup activities have also been modified to allow for a timely enrollment approval. The allowance of e-signatures on most documents has been very helpful in obtaining the necessary essentials, and knowing that obtaining signatures is difficult, we provided directions for use at startup. We also took a hard look at all the documents that were absolutely necessary at startup and what could wait. We wanted to do this in order to provide timely enrollment approval while still abiding by good clinical practice. MBW, or multiple breath washout refresher training, was to be conducted in person at Toronto Sick Kids, but these were unfortunately also canceled due to COVID. Nevertheless, sites who required in-person MBW refresher training are allowed to complete this remotely for both the Simplify and the Promise studies.
Things we never expected. As you may imagine, there have been a lot of things that have come up that was not expected. One of which was IRBs not requiring approval before changes were made to the protocol, meaning a protocol amendment and/or operations memo was not required to make changes due to COVID, including reporting deviations or violations. Their guidance was to move forward with current protocols and document changes appropriately. The restrictions on performing aerosolized generating procedures like spirometry or sputum induction was not expected either. Mandatory COVID testing and the amount of additional PPE was also unanticipated. Certain studies, like Simplify, are allowing disposable PPE to be billed to the study. So, if your sponsor requires certain procedures that need additional PPE, it wouldn't hurt to ask for reimbursement. Impact on future study designs. I'm sure everyone is uncertain how future clinic visits will look. We are also not sure how this will affect the future study designs. It is likely the shift will need to occur if telehealth, remote visits, home sputum, spirometry, OP collection, and e-signatures or digital signatures become the norm or preferred by subjects. This is something all sponsors will have to consider for future studies. There are several impacts to study design that sponsors as well as clinical teams will have to factor in when designing future studies in this pandemic and post-pandemic world. The TDNCC is exploring various designs for future studies. Some of these options include, but are not limited to, a centralized consent platform, which would utilize e-signatures, enabled software, and commercial e-consent platforms. In addition, we also encourage sites to follow their local institutional requirements. Our final thoughts. Think about everything that has transpired since the pandemic started. Think about all of the unknowns and questions that have come up. All we can do is try to be proactive, continue to discover trends and opportunities to complete our work as successfully as possible. The TDNCC also has to understand the limitations and barriers that our sites and subjects are facing. The need to be understanding and flexible in the COVID world is key. Things are changing all the time, and we are all in this together. This will ultimately help the CF community, the TDN network, and other sponsors. Thank you for viewing our presentation. We would also like to thank everyone at the Clinical Trials Unit who gave their input, and to all of our TDN sites. We would also like to thank the CF Foundation for this opportunity.